something was hunting humans for over 400,000 years, likely closer to 2 million years when we trace the full, blood-soaked arc of our evolutionary journey. It wasn't simply competing for territory, protecting its cubs, or opportunistically scavenging. This was something far more relentless and primal, a calculated, instinctive drive fueled by the raw thrill of the stalk, the explosive adrenaline of the perfect ambush, and the casual, almost artistic efficiency of turning our clever, tool-using bipedal ancestors into nothing more than another fresh carcass on prehistory's endless bloody menu. Every single morning, our early relatives stirred beneath vast, unforgiving prehistoric skies that offered no mercy and no guarantees. They crawled out of shallow rock overhangs, damp limestone caves, or hastily built branch and grass lean-tos with their hearts already hammering. They knew in their bones that this day could easily be their last. Every footfall beyond the fragile perimeter of the group was a life-or-death gamble. Humans were not the undisputed lords of the Pleistocene. Far from it. We were the soft, slow, noisy, and deliciously vulnerable prey, shuffling targets moving through grasslands, woodlands, and river valleys ruled by predators that had spent millions of years honing the deadly science of silent, surgical murder long before our ancestors ever learned to strike two stones together and create that first precious spark of fire. Close your eyes and immerse yourself completely. You're alive 1.8 million years ago on the sun-drenched savannas of East Africa, or 48,000 years ago in the bone-chilling blizzards of Ice Age Europe. There are no phones, no flashlights, no rifles, no walls, just your bare hands, a few crudely flaked stone tools or fire-hardened wooden spears, and the desperate, whispered hope that your small campfire wouldn't die out. Before the first gray light of dawn, your ancestors didn't wake up checking battery levels or scrolling through notifications. They woke up scanning every shadow, every blade of grass, every distant tree line, straining their ears for the faintest rustle or low growl that could signal the end of everything. Disease, starvation, falls, and interpersonal conflict were constant threats. But the deepest, most visceral terror came from those intelligent, patient, golden eyes watching from the tall grass, the treetops, or the river's edge, eyes that locked onto a band of Homo erectus, a tight-knit group of Neanderthals, or an early Homo sapiens family, and registered one simple, terrifying thought. Dinner just walked by. The fossil record screams this nightmare in shattered bones, tooth-pierced skulls, and claw-gouged limbs. Across Africa, Europe, and Asia, scientists have recovered thousands of hominin fragments bearing unmistakable signatures of predation, perfectly spaced canine punctures driven through crania with surgical force, long bones snapped clean like dry kindling, scapulae and rib cages etched with deep, parallel claw rakes that speak of powerful, deliberate swipes delivered in the heat of a living hunt. These were not random post-mortem scavenger nibbles or accidental trauma. These were fresh, violent, intentional kills, efficient, targeted, and often executed with a level of predatory expertise that still chills modern researchers. Estimates suggest that predation pressure claimed anywhere from 6 to 10%, or even higher in certain high-risk environments of our ancestors. Not peaceful deaths surrounded by family and old age, but screaming, thrashing, dragged away ends while loved ones huddled powerless around a flickering fire, listening in horror as the sounds of struggle faded into the eternal night. Your distant relatives gathered every single night around those precious life-giving flames, not for casual fireside chats or romantic ambiance under the stars, but because fire was one of humanity's earliest and most revolutionary superpowers against the encroaching void. The crackling light and radiant heat created a tiny, fragile bubble of safety in an otherwise hostile world. Every distant growl, every snapped twig, every unexplained rustle in the underbrush sent waves of adrenaline surging through their bodies. Every necessary trip away from the communal fire, to fetch water at twilight, to relieve themselves in the bushes, or to scout for edible plants or game, might be the final journey they ever took. The prehistoric world was an unrelenting 24/7 meat grinder, and early humans, with their modest running speed, notoriously poor night vision, thin skin, and lack of natural fangs or claws, were heartbreakingly outmatched in almost every physical confrontation. But what exactly turned us into prey? Let's descend layer by layer into this living nightmare, one predator at a time, with every chilling detail the fossils and science can reveal. The leopard's deadly precision, the Swartkrans skull that rewrote prehistory. South Africa's Swartkrans Cave, part of the renowned Cradle of Humankind UNESCO World Heritage Site, guards one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in all of paleoanthropology. In sedimentary layers dating to roughly 1.8 million years ago, researchers recovered the partial skull SK54, a juvenile hominin, most likely a young Paranthropus robustus, though some analyses suggest possible early Homo affinities. Two clean, circular puncture wounds pierce the parietal bones at the back of the skull, spaced approximately 33 mm apart, entering at precise angles with almost surgical efficiency. The victim was young, perhaps 10 to 15 years old, going about an ordinary day of foraging or playing when the world suddenly turned lethal. Pioneering paleoanthropologist C.K. Bob Brain's meticulous 1970s analysis measured every variable with obsessive care. The spacing, depth, divergence, and location matched exactly with the lower canines of a fossil leopard jaw, SK349, recovered from the very same deposit. The upper canines likely drove through the face as the cat carried its prize away. Leopards didn't just kill hominins, they refined the act into a macabre art form. While our ancestors were still tinkering with basic Oldowan stone tools, these agile 60-90 Kilgoon cats executed ambushes that would impress any modern special forces operative. They climbed with ghostly silence and explosive power, dragging carcasses equal to or heavier than many early humans 40 feet, 12+ meters, or higher into the branches. There they cached the body like meat in a natural refrigerator, returning night after night for leisurely meals. Imagine your proud ancestor carefully selecting what they believed was a secure, elevated campsite with panoramic views of the savannah. High above, unseen and unmoving for hours, a leopard lay perfectly camouflaged against the dappled bark, pulse slow and steady, amber eyes tracking every careless movement below. One silent drop, canines slamming into skull or neck, then the effortless haul upward into the branches where hyenas and other ground scavengers couldn't reach. Leopards hunt alone, no pack coordination required. One predator's cold decision ends a life. Their stealth is almost supernatural. They can lie undetected mere feet away in perfect cover. Humans, by contrast, blundered noisily through the landscape, leaving scent trails like beacons and announcing their presence for miles. Even in the 21st century, man-eating leopards remain a documented terror in rural India and parts of Africa despite rifles and vehicles. Back then, armed with nothing but pointed sticks, group vigilance, and hope, Hundreds to thousands of early hominins almost certainly fell to them over the millennia. Many remains never entered the fossil record because leopards cache, high, and clean their kills thoroughly. Trees were never sanctuaries. They were living pantries stocked with convenient, human-sized meals. Ground level invited even worse horrors. True, restful sleep was a rare luxury laced with constant dread. Crocodiles, the water's patient, armored executioners. Every living creature needs water, and ancient crocodiles had turned that universal biological necessity into the ultimate death trap for millions of years. In Tanzania's Olduvai Gorge, the iconic cradle of humankind where the Leakeys made so many groundbreaking discoveries, scientists found hominin foot bones and other skeletal elements bearing deep puncture marks, crushing trauma, and large missing fragments. The killer was Crocodilus anthropophagus, the man-eating crocodile, a species named with blunt honesty because it clearly viewed our ancestors as regular prey. This Pleistocene giant reached lengths of 6 to 7.5 meters, 20 to 25 feet, dwarfing even the largest modern Nile crocodiles. It possessed bony armor plating like a living tank, jaws capable of exerting bone-shattering force, and an ambush launch speed that could turn still water into explosive chaos in a fraction of a second. Picture a thirsty hominin approaching the riverbank at dawn. The water surface mirrors the sky in serene calm. Then, pure, instantaneous violence. Hundreds of kilograms of muscle erupt from concealment, massive jaws clamping down on a leg, arm, or torso. The infamous death roll begins, violent spinning twists that drown the victim and tear the body apart underwater. Larger individuals could swallow a small hominin whole. Families often recovered nothing but grief and lingering terror. Smart groups developed strict survival protocols. Always travel in numbers, probe uncertain shallows with long poles, drink quickly, and move on. The careless or unlucky became cautionary tales that shaped natural selection. Modern crocodiles still claim hundreds of human lives yearly. Facing them with only stone tools and prayers was existential Russian roulette. Their armored hides turned early spears into harmless splinters. For hundreds of thousands of years, every single drink of water carried the very real risk of becoming the next meal. When full darkness descended, a different kind of horror emerged. While solitary leopards struck in eerie silence, hyenas brought overwhelming numbers, cold intelligence, and tireless teamwork. Italy's Grotta Guattari cave near San Felice Circeo records one of the grimest massacres in the Neanderthal record. Around 66,000 years ago, at least 9 individuals, 7 men, 1 woman, and possibly a child, were dragged inside. Their bones were later found scattered, heavily gnawed, cracked open for marrow, and sucked clean. Spotted hyenas don't just scavenge. They actively hunt in coordinated packs, communicating via eerie, whooping laughs. One blocks the exit, while others flank and overwhelm from the sides. Their jaws can pulverize elephant skulls. Human bones were little more than crunchy snacks. Caves that promised shelter often became deadly ambush sites and convenient dens for dragging prey back to feed the clan. Fire provided temporary deterrence, but wood eventually runs out. Guards grow exhausted, and someone inevitably has to step beyond the protective circle of light. Regular hyenas weren't terrifying enough for the Pleistocene. Evolution delivered a monstrous upgrade. Pachycrocuta brevirostris, the giant, short-faced hyena. Weighing up to 150-200 kilo, roughly the mass of 3 stacked adult humans, this beast possessed a bite force powerful enough to splinter tree trunks. At China's famous Zhoukoudian site, hundreds of hominin bones show intense gnawing, heavy fracturing, and telltale stomach acid etching. These powerhouses specialized in taking down large prey, including rhinos, elephants, and any humans naive enough to believe that fire and simple tools granted real safety. A single giant could crack open a hominin skull like a walnut and scoop out the nutrient-rich brain. For more than 400,000 years, these walking nightmares roamed across Eurasia and Africa, turning entire camps into open-air buffets. Wolves elevated the terror to a psychological level that preyed on the mind as much as the body. Pleistocene wolf packs, often consisting of 70-plus kilogauss individuals working in groups of 10 to 20 or more, would circle their targets, deliberately revealing themselves one by one. Their howls served as sophisticated tactical communication, position reports, flanking signals, and victory announcements. They learned and exploited human migration routes, watering schedules, and camp routines with eerie precision. Dire wolves in the Americas and their giant European cousins amplified this threat dramatically. Fire offered protection only as long as fuel lasted. Some wolf lineages eventually became our loyal dogs, choosing mutually beneficial alliance over predation. The ones that didn't kept hunting our ancestors, until superior weapons and organized human groups finally flipped the ancient script. In Germany, 48,000 years ago, a nearly complete cave lion skeleton discovered at Siegsdorf bears dramatic evidence of direct confrontation. A healed puncture wound in a rib caused by a Neanderthal wooden spear thrust. This 300-kilogram beast survived the attack and almost certainly carried a lasting grudge. These magnificent giants hunted in prides using highly coordinated, multi-angle attacks. Their night vision and silent padded paws made them literal ghosts in the darkness. European cave paintings likely served as both trauma records and practical warnings passed down through generations. Yet cut marks on certain lion bones prove that Neanderthals occasionally turned the tables, successfully hunting and butchering these apex predators for meat, hides, and prestige. One tactical mistake against a cave lion, however, meant instant oblivion. The simple fact that we are here today proves our ancestors adapted with remarkable speed and ingenuity. Shift eastward to prehistoric Asia's dense, humid forests, and tigers reigned supreme as solitary masters of the shadows. One single modern Bengal tigress, known as the Champawat tiger, killed 436 people in Nepal and India in the early 1900s, even with firearms available. In prehistory, when humans carried only sharpened sticks and hope, tigers enjoyed absolute field days. They were experts at invisible surveillance, lying in perfect cover for hours before exploding from behind in a rear neck bite that crushed vertebrae instantly. Homo erectus groups quickly learned to avoid thick jungle whenever possible. Open ground offered better visibility and therefore marginally better odds. Persistent man-eaters would return night after night to the same vulnerable group until the humans either fled the area or managed a desperate, lucky spear thrust. Forest fires, ironically, became occasions for cautious celebration. They cleared undergrowth, improved sight lines, and forced the big cats to hunt elsewhere. Finally, the ultimate ambush artists, the saber-toothed cats. Fossils from Africa and beyond show hominin skulls pierced with massive punctures, spaced unusually wide up to 7 inches, 18 centimeters apart, delivered by fangs resembling medieval switchblades. Species such as Smilodon, Homotherium, and Dinophalus weighed around 400 pounds, 180-plus kilogram, and were built like muscular tanks. Optimized for one lightning-fast leap from tall grass or brush. They would pin the prey, drive those fragile but deadly fangs deep into vital arteries or organs. Then wait for the victim to bleed out before feasting at leisure. Some may have operated in small groups, coordinating their dagger-like strikes. Upright, walking hominins presented them with perfect, tall, exposed neck targets. These cats lurked patiently just beyond the reach of firelight, waiting for the inevitable careless straggler. Getting close enough to hear a victim's final, terrified breaths was part of their terrifying signature. These predators didn't merely coexist with us. For countless generations, they kept early humanity firmly in ecological check, actively shaping the very traits that eventually allowed us to rise. Significantly larger brains for better planning and foresight, tighter and more complex social cooperation, increasingly sophisticated tools and weapons, controlled use of fire, and a deep, instinctive, almost primal fear of the dark and the unknown. We rose from the ranks of the hunted to become the dominant hunters through ingenuity, fire, spears, numbers, language, and sheer stubborn resilience. Yet the bones resting silently in those ancient caves still whisper the raw, humbling truth. For the vast majority of our species' story, we were never at the top of the food chain. We were the ones being culled. What do you think? Which of these ancient nightmares sent the biggest chill down your spine? Did I miss any that deserve their own terrifying deep dive? Massive cave bears that could weigh over a ton and occasionally competed directly with humans for shelter? Giant Pleistocene eagles capable of snatching small children, as possibly seen in the famous Tong child fossil? Enormous, lion-sized predatory otters like Enhydriodon, or even other monstrous creatures? Drop your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. If this video sent shivers down your spine and left you profoundly grateful for modern walls, locked doors, streetlights, and supermarkets, smash that like button, subscribe for more immersive deep dives into humanity's terrifying and fascinating past, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Check out the suggested video appearing on screen right now for the next chapter in our ancient survival story. Stay safe out there in the modern world, because even today, the wild still remembers our scent.